Today's spooky spot, we're having a look at McFarlane Toys, McFarlane Monsters, classic characters with a horrifying twist, Frankenstein. Yes, I know, it's not Frankenstein's monster, they just opted to call it Frankenstein. Now, I guess realistically, too, there is a skeleton in the back, but that could very well be the good Dr. Frankenstein who made this monster. It says, warning, choking hazard, small parts not for children under 3 years of age. You can see the McFarlane's 2012 product lines at spawn.com. That also gives you a ballpark idea as to how old this figure is. On the side of the package, a nice little image of Frankenstein there. And on the back, the entire lineup. When you think McFarlane, think monsters. This line of action figures features McFarlane Toys' unique take on classic horror icons. Collect all 6 and be terrified. The figures are Frankenstein, Sea Creature, the Mummy, Voodoo Queen, Dracula, and Werewolf. Spot's going to take a terrifying break and get this opened up. When we come back, we're going to get a better look at the McFarlane Monsters, Frankenstein. Don't go anywhere, guys. Stay tuned. Out of packaging, Frankenstein's a pretty impressive figure, but I guess his biggest problem is getting himself to stand. The way that they've sculpted in the legs, if you have the legs turned at what you believe to be an accurate way, it kind of angles the foot so much on a slant, which makes it really next to impossible. I guess really if you line the kneecap plate here to his shin guard plate, then yes, his legs probably should be more so like this, and then that will allow him to stand a little bit better. But it really ends up making the figure really bow-legged, and his feet are always kind of bending inward for him to properly stand. Luckily, McFarlane Toys has not cut back on their chains. They still have chains all over this monster. I guess maybe a little bit less than what Dracula had, but the inclusion of the chains, a common sight to see with McFarlane Toys, continues still with this figure. Getting a close-up look at his face, again, if I looked at this figure, I almost feel as if I'd be looking more at Quasimodo than I would be Frankenstein. Things that I would not really consider Frankenstein, like long hair, kind of that hunched back pose, and we'll talk more about that in a second. I just kind of see him more coming across like Quasimodo than I do as Frankenstein. He has one bladed weapon on his side arm here, and it's got all this blood all over it. My guess is he probably uses that to decapitate or at least to kill those villagers that would oppose him. Also, too, like his arm. The way you look at, if you look at his arm is disjointed, and I don't know if that was deliberate, but it's definitely not lined up. There's a section where it doesn't quite, it should really be, I guess, to about there, or maybe probably more so inward, but it suffers really badly from the figure. You have to have him posed a certain way so he doesn't look off. One interesting thing to note as well is the side shoulder of Frankenstein. You can actually see, and I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it looks like it actually has some faces actually in it, like this was crafted from a skin. So it could also be kind of like a Leatherface kind of a backstory for Frankenstein. Maybe as he walks the village seaside or hillside, you know, he's looking for new people that he can harvest their pieces from and add it to his body. Speaking of bodies, he's also got this, which I guess really makes up the majority of the figure's wow factor, is that he's got this caged backpack where he's got the remains. And I try to even gauge what these remains could be. It's a skeleton, and he's got these little innards kind of hanging out kind of thing. But I'm wondering if it's actually Dr. Frankenstein, where he's taken the good doctor, and because he is as closest to a father as Frankenstein has, maybe he carries him around. That's the only thought I have. Whether it's right, it's possibly wrong, but I'm thinking that's probably Dr. Frankenstein that he's carrying around on his back. He's also got some hooks that come from the top area of his helmet, comes around to the back. It doesn't look like it actually hooks up to anything. It's just a freestanding hook area. But again, maybe he hangs stuff from these hooks, like again, body parts or what have you. He's a pretty good looking painted figure. Really falls under that same color scheme that Dracula has, the very muted grays, like a dingy beige color, the metalling of the shoulder pad, which is kind of like a copper color. But there's not really a lot of bright colors on Frankenstein, except for the blood, except for the blood area. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a whole section here. I don't know if I can I probably can't remove it. But there's a whole back section on Frankenstein here where you can see that his back has been ripped off. That skin is attached to the back skeleton area. So it really makes me wonder the backstory of this character. For your articulation, like I said, Spot's, unfortunately with this, it's a really pre-posed. You can move limbs, but you can only move them in certain ways that Frankenstein will properly stand. His head does rotate. I would say be careful though, because the rods that are connecting from his head all the way to the back section here. He does have movement in his arm, and luckily, at least when you go to move his arm, the shoulder pad does have some, it does allow you for a little bit of movement in the arms area. He does also have a swivel in the hand, so you can kind of have his hand jetting out like so. His other arm does rotate, but again, it kind of rotates on this weird kind of V-cut angle. He does have a rotation in the forearm, and again, that rotation in the hand. When it comes to his waist is on a swivel. And his legs are also on a swivel cut. Again, that V-cut. I'm glad that action figures have moved away from that V-cut because you can't really do a lot with it. Equally, he has swivel in the lower leg area and nothing in the foot. Is it a great figure? No. I find especially what I'm seeing with the McFarlane monster line, a lot of it's miss. It's a lot more is miss than hit. I have to tip my hat at least that they're coming up with creative ways, or they did come with creative ways to recreate or redesign the monsters. I look at this, I don't think Frankenstein. I think really cool monster with a really neat gimmick, really neat idea having the skeleton on the back. To me, it does not scream Frankenstein. If I could give Frankenstein a rating, I would give him only a very terrifying 7.5. Today's Spooky Spot, we were having a look at the McFarlane Toys, McFarlane Monsters, Frankenstein. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more Spooky Spots heading your way. Thanks for watching. See you next time.